Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Breaking Convention. Star Trek Nemesis is better than Star Trek 2009. So Breaking Convention is a series I'm doing to express an opinion on film that goes against popular opinion or the majority opinion that is overwhelmingly expressed on the internet. Breaking Convention is not very likely to win me more subscribers and is probably more likely than not to gain me more dislikes than likes. However, I'm not doing Breaking Convention to win any popularity contest. I'm doing it to express an opinion I and others share that seldom get heard because it is often drowned out on the internet by the opposing opinion. A saying I was always quite fond of was, just because something is popular doesn't mean it's correct, and so I'm here not only to express opinions but to back them up and explain why I and others may feel this way. Even though they may be in the majority, they are still valid. So, the minority opinion I'll be expressing today is that the 2002 Next Generation film Star Trek Nemesis is better than J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot Star Trek film. I'll give a quick spoiler warning for both films, so if you haven't seen them and don't want them spoiled, you may not want to watch this video. So those who have seen my review on the Star Trek reboots will already know I feel this way. As I said in that video, if I were to place Star Trek 2009 in my top 12 Star Trek movies, it would come in at number 10, ahead of the motion picture and The Final Frontier, but behind all other Star Trek movies, including Nemesis, which was number 4 on my top 10. So I actually think all but 2 Star Trek movies are better than Star Trek 2009, including its sequel, Star Trek Into Darkness. However, I felt it deserved a spotlight to focus particularly on how I think Nemesis is better than Star Trek 2009, because not only do I think it's better, I think it's far superior. In fact, of all the breaking conventions I've done so far and all the ones I plan on doing, this is the one I feel most strongly about. I so strongly feel this opinion is the case, I almost don't even consider it an opinion, so I felt the need to explain why, mainly because Nemesis is not looked on very kindly, even by Next Generation fans, and Star Trek 2009 received glowing reviews. First off, I don't think Nemesis is a perfect film. It has many flaws, such as the soundtrack wasn't very good, the ending with Data's death tried too hard to rip off the Wrath of Khan but failed, and it had ridiculous scenes such as Riker fighting the Riemann guy and a freaking Jeep chase scene that was just plain silly. However, Nemesis has many things Star Trek 2009 doesn't. Chief among them, and most important, is a coherent plot and a backdrop and a universe that actually makes sense. The biggest complaint I had of the reboots is that it has no set logic in the universe. Anything could happen. People can just instantly beam from one side of the galaxy to another. Someone can be promoted from a Starfleet cadet to a captain of a starship instantaneously. A fleet of Federation ships can instantly be destroyed by one futuristic Romulan ship, and so on and so forth. In fact, the only way I enjoyed Into Darkness was because I learned to turn the logic part of my brain off when watching that film. Whereas Nemesis isn't nearly as chaotic. Its universe and backdrop make perfect sense and it's believable. You believe that the Riemann ship has the capabilities of destroying all life on Earth because they earned that believability. But most of all, Nemesis has a coherent story that makes sense, whereas Star Trek 2009 is just all over the frickin' place. First, Kirk's a motorcycle rebel, and then he's in Starfleet Academy being a dick, and then he stows away on the Enterprise, and he's suddenly made first officer, and then he's exiled on the planet, then he's back on the ship, and he tricks Spock into going insane, so he becomes the captain. Wait, I forgot what the frickin' movie was supposed to be about. It's like there's a blur of CGI and some over-the-top action sequences that completely obliterate my senses, and some guy with pointy ears twirling his mustache who claims to be a Romulan and threatening to kill everyone. And then Vulcan blows up, Kirk gets promoted to captain. I'm confused. But what the most confusing part of the film was the reception it received, with viewers and critics alike singing its praises. I suppose it just takes a few CGI and well choreographed action pieces to impress people nowadays. Whereas Nemesis has a straightforward, well-written plot about Picard and Data coming face to face with different versions of themselves, and in them they see parts of themselves they don't like, so they have to overcome their foes, and in doing so have to overcome the worst part of themselves. And on the surface, a clear political plot of unknown factions seizing control of the Romulan Empire, whom they soon learn have an agenda and they mean to destroy Earth and other Federation worlds. Bad music, copycat endings, and ridiculous Jeep chase scenes aside, they managed to pull off this plot very well in a way that explores both Picard and Data's characters and has some of the best and most intense action scenes in all of Star Trek. So, as for the direct comparison, let's start there with the action sequences. So yes, the Jeep chase sequence was silly and it served no storytelling purpose whatsoever, and it was just there to try to look cool and have an action sequence in there. But Star Trek 2009 had several scenes like that. They just had better special effects. The scene most unnecessary and just there to look cool was when Kirk was marooned on a snowy planet where he discovers Old Spock. He's first chased by several giant monsters who then attack each other. That scene is just as gratuitous and unnecessary as the Jeep chase scene and makes just as little sense. Also, let's talk about the big space battle at the end of the movies. For Nemesis, this battle is what made this movie so great for me. I had rarely seen an action sequence as exciting. You really feel the stakes and the tension. And first of all, it made you feel for the characters involved, as Picard was clearly outmatched, but he used his wit and his knowledge of Shinzon, who was essentially a younger version of himself, to outmaneuver and outwit him, and went as far as to ram the ships, which was an extremely risky move. Then he went to deal with Shinzon himself and was saved by Data, who felt a kinship with him that had been explored throughout the film. A very exciting ending that stayed true to the characters and was really well developed, leaving aside the obvious attempt to rip off Wrath of Khan for the moment. Whereas Star Trek 2009's ending, I wasn't really all that excited about. Yes, Earth was in danger, but I found I didn't really care because this world didn't seem real to me. It seemed like a comic book world, and in a comic book world, the heroes always win, so I never felt there were ever any real stakes. And the space battle was just overloaded the senses in way too many modern films do. That also made me ill. I mean, the battle of wits between the barely developed Kirk, who was just shown as an arrogant asshole who inexplicably all of a sudden starts acting like a nice guy, and a two-dimensional villain I care nothing about, and it comes off as, oh, look at me, I'm the bad guy. It's hard for me to really care about the stakes involved there. So let's talk about that next, the villains, because this is where I think the biggest disparity between the two films is at its height. There's just no comparison. In Star Trek Nemesis, you have Shinzon, played wonderfully by Tom freaking Hardy, and at the risk of sounding like a hipster, was Tom Hardy before he was cool. He was a well-rounded character, one you could identify with and sympathize for, and those are the best villains. He could really relate to Picard as he was his clone and essentially a younger version of him. Even though Shinzon desired to destroy the Federation, he had a strong admiration of Picard, and the scenes with Tom Hardy and Patrick Stewart trading stories and having a battle of wits were truly priceless and worth the price of admission alone. And the effect Shinzon had on Picard had they, forced him to doubt himself and wonder what kind of darkness was within him was also amazing, as Picard had to fight his inner demons at the same time as fighting his main adversary, and he manages to defeat them both simultaneously in the same way. It was just pulled off so well. Whereas opposed to Nero of Star Trek 2009, who was a two-dimensional stereotypical villain. Yes, they got Eric Bana, who is a pretty good actor to play him, but it wasn't the acting that was the issue, it was the writing. Nero reminded me a lot of the villain in Mission Impossible 3, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, which was J.J. Abrams' only previous film to this, as both of these villains are cases of two-dimensional villains who are played by amazing actors, but criminally underused and criminally underdeveloped. In Star Trek 2009, they tried to make Nero relatable by having him on a quest to avenge the destruction of his planet and the death of his wife, but that's it. They never really explored this, and he didn't really come off as a well-rounded character. You certainly didn't identify with him. He would just scream and act like a madman, and you could tell they were just trying too hard to make him into a typical scary, crazy maniac instead of making him a realistic, three-dimensional character. Therefore, you didn't really care about him at all. Plus, why the hell is he going around blowing up planets? Why doesn't he, I don't know, try to prevent the destruction of his home planet? And don't tell me he's trying to save his own planet by destroying the Federation worlds, which is a lame excuse they gave in the film, because that's flimsy logic right there, because he's changing all of history. He has no idea how the destruction of the Federation would affect Romulus in the future. Instead, he should have traveled back to his own time, but right before Romulus was destroyed, in order to save it. I guess it's because he's crazy, and he's too busy twirling his mustache to think of it. Nemesis also has more believable and better developed characters. Although most of the Next Generation cast aren't explored too deeply in this film, they do function as a great ensemble cast, as they always do. However, the characters that are explored, such as Picard and Data, and to a lesser extent Riker and Troy, these character story arcs are beautifully crafted, and they come off as well-rounded, three-dimensional characters, whereas in Star Trek 2009, most of the characters other than Kirk and Spock are kind of just one beat background characters, but that's fine. That's kind of what you expect from the original series era. However, Uhura's relationship with Spock was totally unbelievable. McCoy felt like a caricature of his original series counterpart, and Scotty was far too obviously the comic relief. He wasn't really believable at all. And as I said with Kirk, he was portrayed as an arrogant asshole throughout the film, and towards the end, all of a sudden, we're supposed to buy him as a mature Starfleet captain that stood for its principles and was just totally unbelievable. I didn't buy it for a second. The only well-developed character in the film was Spock. However, they even took him too far sometimes, such as his outburst where he suddenly attacked Kirk, which I did not buy at all, and it just came off as fake. So yeah, overall, Nemesis has better villains, better action sequences, a more believable world that actually makes sense, a well-developed and coherent plot, and some great believable character stories, making it, in my opinion, by far the superior film. So that's it for my Breaking Convention video on how Star Trek Nemesis is better than Star Trek 2009. You can check out my channel for many other film and Star Trek reviews. I'll put a link in the description below for my review of the Star Trek reboots and my Star Trek movies top 10 if you want to check that out. And there will be more Breaking Convention videos to come, so make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.